Shabbat Shalom. The 9th century, I don't know if Jews were bored with their prayer books. They wanted to spice things up a little bit. But especially in Sephardic circles and Mizrahi circles, sort of more of the Eastern traditions, the ones that were very much enmeshed in what was the growing community in the Islamic world and the very well-established Christian world, the world that was deeply involved in math and geometry and beautiful buildings, and they decided that they needed to have a way to decorate our prayer books. And so they were part of a movement called micrography, which is taking words, because their second commandment is that you shouldn't take God's image and make it a vain image. You shouldn't put images. Some people took that to mean you shouldn't be making images at all, certainly not in a prayer book. So no drawing in your prayer book, no pictures in the Bible. And so what they did is they took the prayers and they started to make, see, I'm doing show and tell for the people online. Hopefully you can sort of see it if you're sitting here. They started to take the prayers and they made them into images, right? So here you can see this is actually the prayer that we have on our wall. This comes from the Psalms, and they made it into a menorah so that when you would turn the page to this prayer, you would see that there was something artistic about it. There was an image with words inside it. This one's going to be harder for you to see, so you'll just have to trust me. They kept learning how to write smaller and smaller. And so here what you have in the middle are passages from the Torah with passages from the prophets, those lines that you see that probably just look like lines to you around the edge, like a margin, a border. If you look deep inside that, you can't do it from where you're sitting, but you can afterwards if you want. There are little words. And actually there's a whole book around a book here. If you go to Israel, as I did when I was in college, and you want to buy a piece of art that only a college student can afford, you buy something that looks like this. This is what looks to be 5 people playing instruments, but it's actually, when you look closely, the entire book of the Song of Songs. Inside each of these people, you can look later, are hundreds, if not thousands, of words. So micrography is taking these letters and these words and putting them so small that you step back and you see a larger picture. If you look closely, you can read an actual book inside this one image. A woman by the name of Adrienne Marie Brown is an activist and an author, and she's been applying this very concept to how we see society, especially in a post-pandemic world. She says so often we look at community and we think the word community means that you're in a big room with lots of people making lots of noise. That's what community feels like a stadium, filled with people, loud, big space. But actually, she says every community starts and exists because of what she calls the fractal nature of the world. Something has to happen at the smallest level in order for something to happen at the biggest level. So if we were to put this in terms that our soccer coaches would use, they would say that you don't win a game by simply scoring the most points. You win a game by having good footwork, by passing the ball well, by spending thousands of hours training your body so that you can have the endurance to make it through a whole game. A game is not won by simply getting out there on the field and kicking the ball in the goal more than the other team. A game is won by all these little things that come together to make a greater picture. This week in the Torah, we're reading the story of creation. Misha will read tomorrow, the first 4 days, all these big things that happen. Separation of sea and land and sky and light and darkness. Huge concepts. Tonight, Cantor Kathy's going to read the section that comes right at the end of what, a few verses after what Misha will read tomorrow. It's the end of the first story of creation, and it is also the words that you'll hear later tonight, again, in English, because they became the words that we say when we bless the wine, the words of Kiddush. Vayachulu hashamayim v'ha'aretz v'chol tzava'am, or in English, as we might know them better, the heaven and the earth were finished in all their array. All right, heaven and earth, big things, right? The third thing in this list, v'chol tzava'am. We have to wonder why. Wasn't the earth and the heaven enough? What would it mean to add in all their array? The word tzava'am actually comes from the word for hosts, like to host somebody for dinner, or also loosely related to the word for angels. And so when we go to recite Kiddush, as we will at the end of this service, we'll be standing. The tradition is you stand because you have to mimic the act of a host or an angel or a witness. Somebody who sees what's happening in the moment has to stand to welcome Shabbat, to welcome each other, and to bear witness to our history and our past. This is the little thing. The world, the heaven, the earth couldn't be created unless there were hosts. Little things, people, who were doing lots, thousands, let's say, thousands of things were happening in order for the heaven and the earth to be created. Hosts. I'll turn to the great Rabbi Oprah, who on her website says, there are 4 qualities of a host. A host focuses on giving attention, not getting attention. On giving to others what they love, not what you love. On making things personal and not generic. And on being generous because that makes you happy also. In other words, they enjoy hosting. Many of you know that over these past few months, we've made it our theme to talk about how we come back as a community, how we get back to more people in bigger rooms, how we can do that safely, how we can do it successfully. And it's something that I've particularly been focused on, perhaps because I've been so thirsty for what we had at Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur for so long, so thirsty for the power of community to be together. We want that grand nature of lots of people in a big space. But the truth is, it can't happen unless lots and lots and lots of little things happen, unless we are hosts a lot. This morning I got to do one of the best things I ever get to do. I got to be with Ken Ferguson, who's here with his family, as he became the newest Jewish man in the world. We had his Beit Din, his conversation about his Jewish journey. He went to the mikveh. The Jewish people grew by 1 person, at least today. But those of us who know Ken and have come to know him over the last few years know that he's not just another person added to our fold. We've become now the beneficiary, as we've been for a while, of a kind-hearted, thoughtful, wise, gifted man. One willing to give, one willing to be a part of a community out of the kindness of his heart. When you go through the process of conversion, you're asked to write a number of reflections on topics like Israel and Shabbat and peoplehood, and even to give a criticism of the Jewish people, because you can't be Jewish unless you're able to criticize. Ken added his own essay. He wanted to write, separate from all the things we asked him to write, he wanted to tell his part of the story of what he experienced here in this space. So I asked him if I could share it. Here are his words. When I first arrived, I was extremely self-conscious. This wasn't a normal place for me to worship. After all, I had led complete church services and knew the ins and outs. I had no idea how to follow the service through the prayer book. Thinking I was smart, I sat by the door so that I would not be spotted. And we sang L'Chadodi. As the entire congregation turned towards the door, it was very clear to me that I had no idea what I was doing, and it humbled me a lot. During one of my first visits, Dr. Harvey Weil sat in front of me. He introduced himself and asked if I had been there before or was a member or something to that effect. And I responded nervously, "No, not really. I'm not really Jewish." And I stammered about terribly. But with a certain assertiveness that I will never forget, Dr. Weil said, "If you need anything, let me know. I'm Harvey Weil." "I mean it, just ask. I'm Harvey Weil." And so if you need anything, let me know. Ken wrote, "To be honest, I'm still not exactly sure what he meant. I've been to many, many welcoming groups, but this stands out to me beyond all of them. I never needed anything or really had a reason to contact him, but it stands out in my mind as one of the most welcoming things anyone has ever done for me." On one of the future visits, Scott Fromson introduced himself and asked about me before the service. I was still concerned that I may offend someone, and I told him I'm not Jewish, and again stammered about. Scott later saw me a few rows back from him, and he moved. He came back and sat next to me and said, "Mind if I sit with you?" He proceeded to walk me through the prayer book. When I told him he did not need to interrupt his evening to sit with me, he said something to the effect, "My wife is the cantor, and it's very hard to figure out on your own." He sat next to me, showed me little things like how we repeat certain verses, skip others, go from Hebrew to English, and how to navigate the different songs. It was fantastic and made it so much easier for me after that. To this day, I appreciate him for it, as it added a comfort level for me that I cannot explain. It has been somewhere around 5 years that I've come to Temple Israel, he writes. I have loved every minute of it. I thank Rabbi Brown, Dr. Harvey Weil, and Scott Fromson for being the first of many who welcomed me. Sean Paul Allison, David and Cheryl Aronson, Bill and Anita Block, Boaz Elliott, Harvey and Marcia Krieger are others who have treated me so well. And finally, Tripp, who I got to study with and who I truly admire. He is someone who has shared his knowledge of the Talmud and who I truly miss talking to. Many would make me feel welcome, and it is truly appreciated. The journey is not over. In fact, it may have just begun, but I cannot think of a better group to travel with. Little acts, individuals in a room, not knowing that the other is doing something for someone else, pull together to create an image of something that we can't see so often because we're in that space, not outside of it looking at some room filled with people. We're the little words inside the picture. And maybe if we're lucky, someone will come along who had such perspective to show us the impact that we've had and the way that we've been actually working together as a single unit to create something much larger than ourselves without ever knowing. This is the power of little things working together to create something larger. It's why I believe in Genesis, as we'll read tonight, it's not just about heaven and earth, it's also about the tzva'am, the hosts, the people who all along the way made heaven and earth come to be. It's why we'll stand when we raise our Kiddush cup, because we are also the angels, the ones who help other people even if we don't know it. And so as we build our society back, as we look forward to the large gatherings, let us make sure that we're also paying attention to the little points of punctuation, the moments where we say hello to someone, where we offer them some help, where we tell them, really, no, really, if you need anything, I want you to ask. That's what makes a community. That's what brings people together. That's what will grow our society back to where it deserves to be. And it is a great pleasure now to offer a blessing as he changes his perspective, not from being the one with whom we need to welcome, but rather the one who has promised he will now welcome others. As we invite Ken to our bima, we'll offer the words of Shechianu as a community of which he is now fully a part. We bless him for this great moment in his journey and in ours. Please stand as we share in the words of Shechianu over you, Ken, and over us as we welcome you. Look at how shiny he is, the newest Jew in the world.